There are secrets that can shake a town to its core, but few cause an earthquake like the fall of a beloved pastor. When explicit videos surface online, no one wants to believe it's Reverend Thomas Caldwell, the smiling face who offers comfort from the pulpit every Sunday. But when his ex-lover, Alicia Monroe, is revealed as the source, the community turns into a crucible of whispers and outrage. As Caldwell publicly preaches forgiveness and humility, he launches a covert war behind closed doors. Lies are planted, past wounds are exploited, and digital shadows stretch long across the church pews. Every Sunday, the congregation bows their heads, unaware of the manipulation unfolding just beyond the stained glass. So if you think you've heard it all, you haven't. Hit follow on your favorite platform and leave us a comment, because the next story might just change the way you see everything. Don't miss a single twisted turn. Chapter 1. The First Stone. The sun rose quietly over the town, brushing soft gold onto the face of Grace Temple Church. On most mornings, people came to this place for comfort, for hope, for answers. But today, the air outside the chapel buzzed with something different. Anxiety, confusion, and the first sparks of betrayal. Inside, Reverend Thomas Caldwell moved through the empty sanctuary with a heavy, uncertain step. He was a man used to being in control. People called him wise, steady, godly. In his 10 years as head pastor, he had comforted the grieving, guided lost souls, and delivered sermons that drew tears and applause in equal measure. But nothing in Scripture, nothing in all his years of study, had prepared him for this. His office felt cold and hostile. The familiar smell of old books and lemon polish did nothing to settle his nerves. On the desk lay his phone, glowing with messages. Each one was a crack in the world he had built. Is it true? Pastor, I'm praying for you. How could you? Mixed in were media requests, local news, church blogs, a radio host he once called a friend. They all wanted a comment. Some even wanted an apology. He had not slept much. His mind circled back to that single night when loneliness had met temptation. He had thought Alicia was a secret he could bury. She had come to him first as a counselee. Ruth wore her Sunday best, as if armor could protect her from the world's judgment. She spoke gently, asking questions, letting Alicia tell her story from the beginning. Alicia cried when she finished, relief washing over her as Ruth squeezed her hand. I don't know what I can do, Ruth admitted, but I believe you. And I won't let you go through this alone. That moment sparked something in Ruth. She started to watch Caldwell more closely, noticing the gaps in his story, the way his tone changed when people mentioned Alicia. She spoke quietly to other longtime members, careful to choose those she trusted. A few listened. A few shrugged it off. But a seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, Caldwell faced a new threat. A local newspaper, usually friendly to the church, reached out for comment. They had received an anonymous packet, printouts of emails and transcripts of Caldwell's voice messages. The reporter was cautious but persistent, asking for a meeting. Caldwell met him in his office, the walls lined with awards and framed photos of mission trips. He poured coffee, offered a careful smile. I'm the real victim here, he insisted. Alicia is unstable, and she's been targeting me for months. I've forgiven her, but she won't let go. The reporter listened, but said little. He left with a polite nod and a notebook full of questions. That evening, Caldwell paced his study, heart pounding. He needed to control the story. He sent urgent emails to church leaders, warning them about fake news and outside attacks. He told his inner circle to stay silent, to trust him, to keep praying. But the next Sunday, the air in the sanctuary was electric. People murmured about the reporter's visit. Someone had seen Alicia in town, walking with her lawyer. Some wondered if she would come to service and confront Caldwell in front of everyone. He stood at the pulpit, sweat prickling under his collar, and delivered his boldest sermon yet. He spoke of wolves among the sheep, of the dangers of false prophets, of standing strong in faith when the world tries to tear you down. His voice rose with passion, but underneath, it was fear that fueled him. After service, Ruth approached him, calm and steady. "Pastor, are you all right? You seem troubled." Caldwell forced a smile. "The enemy is busy, Ruth, but God is stronger." She met his eyes and did not look away. "Sometimes the enemy is closer than we think." He turned from her, rattled. That night, Alicia's lawyer called with news. "We have enough to move forward," he said. "We can file a civil suit for harassment, defamation, and revenge porn. Are you ready?" Alicia's heart raced. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. Caldwell sensed the shift too. He saw fewer smiles at church, heard more silence when he spoke. Gossip turned sharp, circling back to his office. He found anonymous notes slipped under his door, some threatening, some pleading for the truth. His nightmares returned, full of faces turning away from him, voices accusing him in the dark. As October drew to a close, a single pane of stained glass in Grace Temple cracked from top to bottom. No one knew how it happened. Some said it was just the change in the weather. Others whispered it was a sign. For Alicia, it was the beginning of something new. For Caldwell, it was the start of a reckoning he could no longer control. Chapter 5. The Gathering Storm. A cold rain drummed on the roof of Alicia's apartment as she prepared for what might be the most important week of her life. The suit was ready. The paperwork was stacked in neat folders. Her phone was set to record every conversation. For the first time in months, she no longer felt like prey. She felt prepared. Her lawyer, Mr. Harris, met her in his office, reviewing the final details before filing the lawsuit. "This isn't going to be easy," he cautioned, voice steady. "They'll try to paint you as a liar, maybe worse. But we have the evidence, and the law is on your side." Alicia nodded, heart pounding. "I just want it to stop," she whispered. "It will," Mr. Harris replied, "but not right away." At Grace Temple, the storm outside was matched by a storm inside. For the first time since the scandal broke, Caldwell felt real fear pressing in. The church staff was jumpy. Some volunteers resigned quietly, no explanations given. Prayer meetings grew tense, full of silent stares and worried looks. Word of Alicia's legal action spread fast, reaching even the board members who had once defended Caldwell without question. He gathered his closest allies, late one evening, meeting in the church basement where their voices wouldn't carry. "This is an attack from the outside," Caldwell insisted. "It's meant to destroy everything we've built here. We must stand together." His allies nodded, but some looked down, avoiding his eyes. Caldwell noticed the cracks forming but refused to acknowledge them. After the meeting, he sat alone, staring at a water stain on the ceiling. Every decision, every lie, weighed heavier now. He prayed, but the words felt hollow. He asked for strength, for wisdom, for forgiveness. In the silence that followed, he felt nothing but the echo of his own voice. As the legal complaint became public, the town split along invisible lines. Some saw Alicia as a brave woman demanding justice. Others clung to Caldwell's innocence, insisting the devil was attacking a good man. Social media was a battlefield. Old friends argued, families stopped speaking, and church elders pleaded for unity. Alicia's story made the local paper. The headline was careful, but the story included pieces of evidence. Caldwell's voice messages, details of the smear campaign, proof of anonymous tips traced back to the church. Reporters started calling, asking Alicia to tell her side. She spoke quietly, with the lawyer beside her. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she said. "I only wanted the truth." The backlash was swift. Caldwell supporters doubled down, organizing prayer rallies and posting Bible verses online. They filled the church on Sundays, clapping louder for every word he spoke. But there was a difference now, a tension in the air, a sense of something waiting just out of sight. At home, Caldwell's wife, Evelyn, sat across the dinner table, hands folded. She had always supported him, always trusted him. Now she looked at him with questions he could not answer. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, she asked, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" Caldwell shook his head. "You know everything that matters," he said softly. She turned away, but the silence between them grew. Ruth Holloway worked quietly behind the scenes. She encouraged other women in the church to speak openly, to ask questions, to listen. A few came forward with their own stories, moments when Caldwell's words or actions had crossed lines, made them uncomfortable, left them confused or afraid. None of them had proof, but together their stories formed a pattern, and Ruth took notes, promising to protect their names. The church board called an emergency meeting. This time, more members spoke up. "We can't ignore this any longer," one said. "There's too much smoke for there not to be fire." Caldwell was invited to speak. He denied everything, calling Alicia's claims a web of lies spun by a bitter woman. His voice cracked with anger and fear. But as he left the meeting, he heard the door click behind him. The board remained inside, voices rising in heated argument. For the first time, Caldwell felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. On the day the lawsuit was filed, Alicia walked to the courthouse through the rain, head high, lawyer by her side. A small crowd had gathered, some to support, some to gawk, a few to shout insults. Cameras flashed. Reporters called her name. She kept walking, never looking back. Inside, she stood before the judge and swore to tell the truth. Her voice shook, but she spoke every word. The judge listened, asking careful questions. Caldwell, through his lawyer, denied all wrongdoing. That night, Alicia sat at her kitchen table, staring at the stack of documents. The fight was only beginning. The real trial, of truth, of courage, of faith, was just ahead. But for the first time, she felt her story was being heard. At Grace Temple, Caldwell prepared for Sunday service with shaking hands. The sanctuary was full, but the warmth was gone. Eyes followed him as he climbed the steps to the pulpit. He spoke about storms, about the testing of faith, about trusting God when all else fails. But as he spoke, even he felt the hollowness in his words. Outside, the rain kept falling. Leaves gathered in the gutters, swirling in the wind, and somewhere above, the cracked pane of stained glass let in a sliver of cold, gray light. Alicia, watching from her apartment, closed her eyes and whispered, "Let it rain." Chapter 6. Exposed, the courthouse buzzed with anticipation as the trial date approached. Local news vans lined the curb, their satellite dishes turned to the gray November sky. Inside, lawyers shuffled papers and rehearsed arguments, Security guards watched the doors, and every seat in the gallery filled early. Some with supporters, some with skeptics, and some with people who just wanted to see a spectacle. Alicia arrived early each morning, dressed simply, face calm but pale. She tried to ignore the stares as she passed through metal detectors, the whispered insults, the occasional muttered prayer for her soul. Her lawyer, Mr. Harris, kept close, reminding her to breathe, to trust the process, to keep her answers simple and honest. Caldwell entered each day surrounded by allies, his wife, now stoic and silent, a few loyal deacons, and his attorney, a sharp-tongued man in an expensive suit. The pastor held his Bible tightly, head high, but his smile had disappeared. The whispers followed him too, and now even his closest supporters avoided his gaze. Inside the courtroom, the judge laid out the charges: revenge porn, defamation, harassment, and emotional distress. The evidence was clear: messages, emails, voice recordings, the infamous video. Alicia's lawyer laid everything out, each piece of the puzzle fitting together, telling the story of how power could become poison in the wrong hands. Alicia took the stand first. The courtroom fell silent as she described how the affair began, how Caldwell had used her secrets against her, how her life unraveled after the video appeared. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier as she spoke. I lost everything: my job, my friends, my sense of safety. I just want to be able to walk outside again without fear. Caldwell's lawyer tried to break her down. He pointed to old photos, to moments when Alicia had smiled in church, to texts sent late at night. You weren't forced, he insisted. You were a willing participant. I was vulnerable, Alicia replied quietly. I trusted him. When Caldwell took the stand, his words were smooth but thin. He spoke of temptation, of forgiveness, of how he tried to help Alicia but was repaid with lies and betrayal. He denied sending the video, denied orchestrating the smear campaign. But the evidence told a different story, and every denial made the jury shift in their seats. For the first time, the congregation of Grace Temple saw their leader without the shield of the pulpit. They watched as his voice wavered under cross-examination, as the confident man who preached about grace and truth struggled to explain away angry messages and late-night threats. Outside the courthouse, the lines blurred between those who believed and those who doubted. Supporters for both sides argued in the street, holding signs, chanting prayers, sometimes weeping. News anchors spoke of scandal and faith, betrayal and justice, each searching for a headline that would stick. Inside, Ruth Holloway waited in the hallway, clutching a folder of statements from other women who had felt uncomfortable under Caldwell's guidance. When called, she testified with quiet dignity, her words careful, her gaze unwavering. She spoke of patterns she had witnessed, of hushed conversations and women who left the church without explanation. We were told to forgive, to trust. But trust isn't blind, she said. Caldwell's mask slipped further as he listened. For the first time, he saw how small his circle of true supporters had become. He tried to meet his wife's eyes, but she looked away, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The trial stretched over several days. Each session brought new revelations, anonymous tips from community members, more digital evidence, a sudden flood of past complaints once people realized they might finally be heard. The judge listened, the jury took notes, and the whole town held its breath. Alicia sat through every moment, exhausted but determined. She thought of all the nights she had considered giving up, of every door that had slammed in her face. Now, with each testimony, each piece of truth revealed, she felt lighter, as if the weight she carried was finally being shared. As the final arguments closed, the courthouse was quieter than ever. Both sides waited. Nerves stretched thin, the rain outside now turned to sleet. The judge announced a short recess before the verdict, and Alicia stepped outside, breathing in the cold air, feeling the bite of winter, but also a kind of hope she hadn't known in a long time. Back in his study that night, Caldwell stared at his own reflection, searching for the man he used to be. He wondered when he had crossed the line, when ambition and pride had overtaken faith. Alone in the dark, he realized he was no longer the shepherd. He was just another man exposed, his secrets laid bare for all to see. As the town waited for the verdict, Alicia walked home beneath a sky heavy with snow, each step carrying her closer to whatever would come next. Whatever happened, she knew she had done the one thing that mattered. She had spoken the truth. Chapter 7, Judgment Day. The courtroom was cold and silent as the jury filed back in, their faces unreadable. Outside, snowflakes drifted slowly, blanketing the town in quiet white. Inside, the tension was thick, like the weight of years pressing down on everyone present. For Alicia Monroe and Reverend Thomas Caldwell, this was the moment everything would change. The judge's voice broke the silence. "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood, voice steady but grave. "We have, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Please read the verdict." Alicia's heart pounded so loud it filled her ears. She held Mr. Harris's hand tightly, their fingers entwined. Across the room, Caldwell sat rigid, eyes fixed forward. But the mask was gone. His confidence was shattered, replaced by a hollow defeat. The foreperson's words echoed through the chamber. On the charge of revenge porn, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of defamation, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of harassment, we find the defendant guilty. A gasp swept the courtroom. Caldwell's lawyer whispered urgently, but the verdict stood. Relief and disbelief flooded Alicia's chest. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she looked toward the judge. Justice had been served, but the fight was far from over. After court adjourned, reporters swarmed. Alicia spoke with quiet dignity. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about every person who has been silenced, shamed, and blamed for someone else's sins. It's about standing up and saying no more." Meanwhile, Caldwell's world crumbled. His wife, Evelyn, left quietly during the media frenzy, refusing to answer questions. Church attendance plummeted. The board convened and voted to remove him from his position immediately. In his empty office, Caldwell sat alone, staring at the cracked stained glass window he once thought would protect him. The shards of color were fractured, distorted, just like his life. He realized that his sermons about forgiveness had been hollow lies. Built on secrets and manipulation, the community struggled to heal. Some members left the church, unable to reconcile their faith with the betrayal. Others stayed, determined to rebuild. Ruth Holloway became a leader in this new chapter, helping to create safe spaces and holding honest conversations about power, trust, and accountability. Alicia found strength in unexpected places. Friends reached out. The advocacy group helped her start speaking publicly about her experience. Slowly, she rebuilt her life, her confidence, her sense of self. One crisp morning, months later, Alicia stood in front of a crowd, not in a courtroom or a church, but at a community center. She shared her story, her voice steady, her eyes bright with hope. "Truth matters," she said. No one should live in fear of their past being used against them. We all deserve to be heard. As the audience applauded, Alicia smiled, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. The road had been long and painful, but the storm had passed. And beneath the broken glass of Grace Temple, new light was beginning to shine, broken by life, needing hope. She was younger, beautiful, lost. He was flattered by her attention, comforted by her laughter. One evening, a prayer session became an embrace. An embrace became a kiss. A line was crossed, then crossed again, until secrecy became a habit as regular as Sunday worship. Now, all that secrecy was shattered. At the far end of the building, the janitor paused, broom in hand. He looked at Caldwell with concern but said nothing. The pastor gave him a nod and closed himself in his office, shutting out the world. He let out a sigh and sat at his desk, opening his Bible by instinct. He stared at the words, but they did not comfort him. His hands shook. He remembered the video, how it felt seeing himself through the eyes of a stranger. Alicia had filmed them, secretly, in that motel room. She had promised never to show it to anyone. He had believed her. When they parted ways, it was with the understanding that their secret would die with them. But something had changed in her. Or perhaps something in him had pushed her too far. Now, she was everywhere. Her face on gossip sites, her name on everyone's lips. But not as a victim, as he had expected, but as a villain. The messages she received were cruel, vicious, threatening. She became a target for every ugly word in the town's vocabulary. The worst part was, Caldwell knew he had the power to change it. He had spent years building a congregation that trusted him, loved him, even idolized him. If he denied, they would believe. If he attacked, they would follow. All he needed was a plan. He closed his eyes and tried to pray. The words came out in a whisper. God, help me. But instead of peace, his mind turned to strategy. He began making a list, mentally, of Alicia's weaknesses. The things she had confessed during their sessions. Her struggles with alcohol, her failed jobs, the custody battles she had lost. He could use these. Not all at once, but carefully, in whispers and nudges. So the doubt would grow and blossom. He would preach forgiveness. He would be the victim. He would show the world how dangerous a bitter woman could be. Across town, Alicia Monroe lay on her couch, phone in hand, scrolling through message after message. Some begged her to take the video down. Others blamed her for ruining a good man. A few threatened her with violence. She had not expected to feel so alone. When she first sent the video to a friend, she wanted the truth to come out. She wanted Caldwell to pay, to feel what she felt every night when she couldn't sleep, haunted by guilt and shame. But now, she saw her name twisted in the dirt, dragged through the mud, spat on by people who did not know her at all. She tried calling her mother, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried her best friend, who only replied with, "You should have known better." She closed her eyes and wept. At Grace Temple, people began to arrive for morning prayer. Small groups gathered near the doors, whispering behind cupped hands. Some looked away when Caldwell entered. Others tried to offer awkward comfort. Caldwell smiled through clenched teeth. He nodded, shook hands, thanked them for their prayers. He took his place at the pulpit, looking out at a sea of worried faces. "My friends," he began, "these are troubling times. I know you've heard things, seen things. I can't explain everything, but I can promise you this. God forgives. He lifts us up when we fall. He calls us to love, not to judge. The words sounded right. People nodded. Some wept. But even as he preached grace, his heart grew hard. He knew what he had to do. He would not step down. He would fight, and he would win, no matter what it cost. Alicia sat alone as the sun rose higher, painting her small apartment in pale gold. She was not sure if she had made a mistake, but she was certain of one thing. She was not the monster they made her out to be. Somewhere inside, hope flickered. Maybe the truth could survive the storm. Maybe someone would believe her. But in the town of Grace, truth was just another word for what the most powerful person could control. And right now, no one was more powerful than the man in the pulpit. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Sanctuary. The days after the scandal broke were heavy with tension, like a summer sky before a storm. Every street in town seemed to lead back to Grace Temple, and every conversation, whether at the grocery store, at the barber's chair, or at the school gates, came around to Reverend Caldwell and Alicia Monroe. Inside the church, the world felt quieter. But it was a silence full of questions. The sanctuary still smelled of old wood and polished brass. Sunlight spilled through the colored glass, painting fractured rainbows across the pews. But for the first time in years, people sat far apart. Eyes darted nervously. Some prayed quietly, their lips moving fast. Others only watched, waiting for the next twist. Caldwell walked the aisles each morning, greeting parishioners by name, gripping hands with that steady pressure he'd always used to comfort the anxious. "We're all sinners," he would say softly. "God's love is bigger than our mistakes." His voice carried the right mix of regret and strength. The congregation wanted to believe him. Some even needed to. But not everyone could ignore the doubt. Ruth Holloway, who had taught Sunday school for more than 20 years, watched Caldwell from the back of the church. She remembered Alicia as a troubled girl, always desperate for attention. She also remembered the way Caldwell had once lingered a little too long at the young woman's side. Ruth felt her faith waver, a tremor beneath her usual certainty. Outside, the church board gathered for a special meeting. The oldest deacon, Mr. Randall, cleared his throat and tried to speak calmly, though his hands shook. "We must do something," he said. "This church has stood for 100 years. We cannot let it fall now." Some wanted Caldwell to take a leave, at least until the scandal faded. Others argued for forgiveness and unity. "If we start doubting every leader who makes a mistake, where will it end?" asked Sister Beale, her voice trembling with emotion. Caldwell listened quietly. He knew how to read a room. He played his part perfectly, nodding in remorse, accepting their prayers, but never admitting to more than falling short of God's ideal. "Let's keep our eyes on the Lord," he told them, his voice breaking just enough to sound sincere. That afternoon, Caldwell sat alone in his office, planning his next move. He needed to act before the board forced his hand. He scrolled through his phone, finding old texts and emails from Alicia. Messages full of anger, but also desperation. He forwarded a few to a trusted friend on the board, adding a single sentence: "I worry for her mental health." The implication was clear. Maybe Alicia wasn't malicious, just unstable. Maybe she needed help, not blame. The next day, the rumors spread like wildfire. By Sunday, a dozen people whispered about Alicia's history. Some claimed she had tried to hurt herself in the past. Others suggested she had lied about Caldwell to get revenge for being rejected. The narrative changed almost overnight, painting Alicia as a troubled soul rather than a woman seeking justice. Alicia felt the shift in the wind. At first, she tried to fight back. She sent emails to local reporters, explaining her side, attaching copies of texts and voicemails from Caldwell. But no one responded. One journalist even replied, "You seem unstable. Maybe you should get help." Alicia stared at her screen, numb. At night, Alicia dreamed of standing in the church aisle, begging people to listen. But no one turned to see her. Her voice was lost beneath the sound of Caldwell's sermon, thundering about grace and forgiveness. She woke gasping for air, her sheets tangled around her body. The following Sunday, Caldwell preached about David and Bathsheba, about how great men sometimes fall, but God's mercy is greater than any sin. The congregation nodded, some wiping tears from their eyes. Few noticed the woman at the back, sitting alone, her face hidden beneath a scarf. Alicia left before the final hymn, the words ringing in her ears. "Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone." She wondered how many stones would be thrown before the truth finally broke through. That week, Caldwell's campaign picked up speed. A few well-placed comments in private meetings, a gentle reminder to the church newsletter editor to pray for Alicia's healing. Each move was careful, calculated. He never lied directly, but he didn't need to. He was still the voice people trusted, the man who had baptized their children, who had stood at their loved ones' graves. They wanted to believe he was the victim. It was easier that way. Meanwhile, Alicia's world shrank. Friends stopped answering her calls. Her landlord asked about the unpleasantness and suggested she move out when her lease was up. Her job at the daycare was quietly terminated. Too much distraction, her boss said, not meeting her eyes. Alicia found herself more alone than ever, haunted by shame and regret. She started recording a diary on her phone, desperate to preserve her version of the truth. Late at night, she spoke into the darkness, her voice raw. "I'm not crazy," she whispered. "He did this. I just want someone to listen." One night, scrolling through social media, Alicia noticed something strange. A new account had been created in her name, posting old photos, twisted captions, cruel inside jokes. Strangers messaged her with threats and taunts. Caldwell's smear campaign had moved online, the digital fire now raging beyond control. Caldwell watched it all from his study, sipping tea, a faint smile on his lips. As he closed his Bible and prepared his next sermon, he knew he was winning. Alicia's cries faded beneath his words, and the church, hungry for certainty, clung to his version of the story. But deep down, even Caldwell could feel the weight of his actions building, like storm clouds just over the horizon. For now, though, he remained untouchable, his secret safe, his pulpit secure, his congregation loyal. But storms always come, no matter how long the sky stays clear. Chapter 3. The Wolves and the Flock. The church calendar moved on, even as the undercurrent of scandal grew stronger. Summer turned to early fall. The leaves outside Grace Temple yellowed and dropped, collecting on the sidewalk like little reminders that time was always moving, no matter who was hurt or who was forgiven. But for Alicia Monroe, time felt stuck. Each morning was a battle. She woke to a phone flooded with insults and threats, with fake friend requests and cruel memes. She tried changing her number, but the messages always found her, as if the entire town was working together to keep her down. She barely left her apartment. Food spoiled in the fridge. The lights stayed off for hours at a time. At night, She stared at the ceiling, remembering the way Caldwell used to talk to her. Gentle, fatherly, full of concern. He'd seemed so different from other men. Safe. Now, his voice haunted her dreams, twisted with accusation and self-righteousness. Alicia called her mother again and again, but she never picked up. Friends from her old life blocked her on social media. The world outside seemed full of wolves, and Alicia was the lamb they had marked for slaughter. Desperate, she reached out to an advocacy group for revenge porn victims. The woman on the line sounded kind, but exhausted. She told Alicia her story wasn't unusual. "People want to blame the woman," she said. "It's easier to shame than to face the truth. But you're not alone. There are laws, but they take time. Stay strong." Alicia wrote down the name of a lawyer who specialized in digital abuse cases. But when she called, the secretary told her the firm was overbooked and would call her back if anything changed. She hung up, feeling more hopeless than ever. Meanwhile, at Grace Temple, Caldwell was at the height of his power. The church parking lot was full every Sunday. People came from neighboring towns, drawn by the drama, hungry for a word of hope. Caldwell gave it to them every week, blending scripture with vague references to his trials. He spoke of forgiveness, resilience, and the need to love those who tried to harm the flock. The sermons became performances, each one a mixture of confession and manipulation. He never said Alicia's name, but everyone knew who he meant when he talked about those led astray by bitterness and regret. His tears were real, but only because he was crying for himself. After service, Caldwell held court in the foyer, shaking hands, hugging the sorrowful, blessing children. He kept his enemies close and his allies closer. He invited doubters to private dinners, where he listened to their concerns and reminded them of all the good he had done. When the church board met again, he brought up the need for spiritual healing in the congregation. He suggested new support groups, more outreach, a bigger social media presence. The board agreed to everything. No one dared to challenge him. The church needed a shepherd, and Caldwell played the part perfectly. But not everyone was convinced. Ruth Holloway watched from a distance, noticing the subtle ways Caldwell shifted blame, the way certain people's names disappeared from the prayer list, the way whispers seemed to follow Alicia's name like a curse. One evening, Ruth found Alicia's number and dialed. When Alicia answered, her voice was small, almost afraid. "Alicia, this is Ruth from Grace Temple. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what you're going through. I don't know what's true anymore, but I know what it's like to feel alone." Alicia nearly dropped the phone. No one had spoken to her with kindness in weeks. She didn't trust it, not at first, but she listened. Ruth offered to meet her for coffee, but Alicia declined. "It's not safe for me to be seen in public," she said quietly. "But thank you. Thank you so much." That small act of kindness gave Alicia the strength to keep fighting. She started documenting everything: screenshots, messages, posts. She printed emails and texts, stored them in a folder marked Truth. She didn't know what she would do with it, but it made her feel less helpless. One day, while scrolling through an old email account, Alicia found something she had forgotten: a series of voice messages from Caldwell, recorded during the height of their affair. In them, his tone was gentle, pleading, vulnerable. He confessed his love, his fear of being discovered, his dreams of running away. The evidence was raw, undeniable. She transferred the files to a USB drive, her hands shaking. It wasn't a video, but it was proof. Proof that Caldwell had lied, not just to the congregation, but to everyone. Meanwhile, Caldwell continued to tighten his grip. He made quiet calls to local employers, warning them about Alicia's unstable behavior. He sent anonymous tips to the daycare licensing board. He convinced more church members to cut her off for their own spiritual health. He even started writing a book, Grace After the Fall, framing his ordeal as a story of personal redemption. He planned interviews, a book tour, maybe even a national speaking circuit. The world would know his side, and his side only. But storms were brewing beneath the surface. Alicia's small acts of resistance, her folder of evidence, her phone diary, her decision to hold on to the truth, were growing stronger. Ruth kept in touch, offering comfort from afar. A reporter in the city, finally curious, replied to Alicia's emails. The legal aid group put her in touch with a new lawyer, one who specialized in high-profile digital abuse. The wolves closed in, but the lamb was learning to fight back. And deep inside Grace Temple, beneath the sermons and the hymns, beneath the polished brass and stained glass, something began to crack, a truth too big to stay hidden forever. Chapter 4. A crack in the glass. Autumn swept through the town, and the wind outside Grace Temple carried both the chill of coming winter and the restless energy of a community in denial. Inside the church, the organ played hymns as usual. But the music was a thin veil stretched over nerves. People arrived earlier now, clustering in hushed groups, casting glances at the doors, at each other, and always at Reverend Caldwell. He still moved with confidence. His sermons remained powerful, his voice strong. But some noticed the change, a little less warmth, a little more caution, a smile that looked painted on. He took to locking his office door, even during the day. He stayed later in the evenings, saying he needed time for prayer. But Caldwell's world was shrinking. The texts of support from distant pastors grew less frequent. Some colleagues never replied at all. The bishop sent a polite but firm letter urging rest and reflection. Caldwell ignored it. To step down would be to admit defeat. He was determined to hold his pulpit until the very last moment. Behind the scenes, Caldwell became more ruthless. He monitored social media, searching for any sign of Alicia's voice. He told his most loyal supporters to report and flag anything she posted. He wrote a private memo to the church board, expressing concern for Alicia's mental stability, warning them not to respond to her messages. He even hinted at possible legal action if the harassment continued. Most board members nodded along, afraid or exhausted, eager for the problem to go away. But Alicia refused to disappear. Her new lawyer was patient and determined, slowly collecting evidence and warning her to stay silent publicly until the time was right. Alicia hated the waiting. Every day felt like standing in front of a train, hoping it would slow down before it reached her. She kept adding to her folder. She saved new messages, voicemails from Caldwell, and screenshots of hateful posts. She recorded her thoughts each night, speaking softly into her phone so the neighbors couldn't hear. "This is for the day when someone finally believes me," she told herself. One afternoon, Alicia met Ruth Holloway in a quiet city park. Both women wary, looking over their shoulders before sitting down.